Rizvi. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you so much for joining me. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here tonight. And we also have Brother Rauf Shokoya. Thank you so much for joining me. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
It's an absolute pleasure to have amazing guests to speak tonight. So I would urge you all to take the opportunity to join the discussion. It's for everybody and a platform where we want to create further community sort of integration and support. Today we are going to be discussing obviously about challenges, but particularly about confronting sectarianism. Now, this is something which we always discuss mainly on a sort of general platform, but I want to go into it as to how new Muslims are coming into Islam, especially trying to understand what does that mean. Before I come to you, Brother Rauf, I just want to speak to our Sayyid tonight for you to give us some sort of definition for anyone that's watching that may not even understand when they enter Islam that this actually exists and what does that mean?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. When we invite people to Islam and we say that it is in your nature to believe in a God, and we're all born Muslims, and you should come back to the fitrah of the nature. We invite them to the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the Holy Quran very beautifully puts it, that it says, Inna hadhihi ummatukum ummatan wahida wa ana rabbukum. Indeed, this is your one ummah, so we're all one. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I am your Lord. And Imam Ali al-Islam says, Mal ibn Adam, what is with children of Adam and arrogance or pride? We are all born the same. We're all from one father and one mother, Adam and Eve, Hazrat Adam and Hawa. So therefore, our roots are similar, if not the same. The Holy Quran also says that إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ مِنْ ذَكَرٍ وَأُنْثَى وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ قَبَائِلَ وَشُعُوبًا لِتَعَارَفُوا إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. That indeed we have created you from one man and one woman. So Allah does not say Adam and Eve, He says one man and one woman. And we have placed you into different tribes and different creeds, backgrounds, or races, so that you may associate with each other. But indeed, the most honorable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who is the most practicing or the most God conscious. However, we do see that new Muslims and also people who are born Muslims may confront sectarianism. Now, sectarianism, when we say sectarianism, is basically unsuriya in Arabic. To say that or to believe that you are better than the others because of your background or looks or your color, race. And there are many reasons for it. The first being to be unsuri or sectarian was Satan. He said, Ana khairun minhu, I'm better than him, to Adam. But the best definition I've come across is from Imam Sajjad al-Islam. Well, astaghfirullah, I don't want to say that this is the best definition because I think it is. But I have read so many things and, different things appeal to you. And this is what appealed to me the most. And it is a definition, Imam Sajjad al-Islam says that sectarianism or racism is something that if you see in someone from you, you overlook it and say it is fine, but if someone else does it, then it is wrong. So someone, if it is my child or my Shia brother or my Pakistani brother or my anything which you say associate with yourself, and you say because it is mine, it is okay, but if someone else does it, then it is wrong. And that is prejudice or unsuriya or sectarianism. So it is important that we are not, the Holy Quran says, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Hold on to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do not divide yourself into sects. So the basis of religion are one God, the Holy Prophet ﷺ, Imama, Quran, Ahlul Bayt. These are the foundations, and therefore we must hold on to the love of all of these things and the love for the Ummah, one Ummah. And that is the key. These fingers are very weak as separate. I can accidentally break my fingers, but if they're together, then they're very strong. Therefore, we must not divide ourselves. We must hold on to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and stay united.
Thank you so much for that introduction. It was absolutely beautifully defined and explained, and it actually even highlighted what I never even thought of before, the way you explained it. So that's so vital. Thank you so much, Saeed. That was absolutely amazing. I just want to come over to you, Brother Rauf. How did you find when you first entered into Islam? Firstly, before we go into your journey later on, did you find that you knew about the different sort of sect or the different sort of Muslims that do exist? Or was it something that you kind of, after entering into being a Muslim, that was something that you actually confronted?
Bismillah. It's a good question. I think, well, I know that for me, unlike many of the brothers and sisters who I have met over the years or who maybe came to the fold of Islam around about the same time as we do find, particularly if you find a revert who happens to be a follower of the Ahlul Bayt, alayhim salam, that the journey, of course, everyone's story is different, but the journey typically tends to be one of a discovery of Islam, and then you decide to take your shahada and you become a Muslim. And maybe the brothers and sisters who introduce you to Islam were of the Sunni persuasion. And then some of these brothers and sisters later on, through further research, decide that they want to be followers of or subscribe to the 12 Shia school of thought. In my particular case, I don't know if I can say fortunate, in that when I was first introduced to Islam, it was for a Sunni brother who, of course, till this day is a very good friend of mine. But through my research, I came to find out about the Shia. And prior to becoming a Muslim, I was able to, I hope, be unbiased, be objective in my research. And I tried my best to look at all of the pros and not some stuff, all of the pros and cons, but at least have all of the arguments for each particular school laid out in front of me. I tried my best to be diligent in my research. I asked a lot of brothers and sisters, and I decided quite early on that the right path for me was to become a follower of the Ahlul Bayt. I mean, you mentioned sectarianism, and I just want to mention one particular point with regards to that, and that was to do with my research at the time. I remember having the opportunity, alhamdulillah, to meet a lot of brothers and sisters who were already followers of the Ahlul Bayt, alayhim salam. And none of them pressurized me into becoming a Muslim, nor actually becoming a follower of the Ahlul Bayt. They told me that you may hear a lot of negativity about us, the Shia. Pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to sincerely to guide you, but also don't necessarily, one of the bits of advice I remember quite clearly was that Shias told me that I should go to them to find out about their particular belief system and not necessarily others, and that I should also do the same with our Sunni brothers and sisters. Don't necessarily listen to Shias and listen to what they have to say about Sunnis. Go to Sunnis, ask them and find out. And I remember going to a very prominent Sunni mosque here in London many years ago. We're talking about maybe 25 years ago. And I went to go see the chief imam of that particular mosque. And contrary to the advice that these Shia young brothers and sisters were giving me, this Sunni alim was telling me that basically I didn't have the mental faculties to be able to defend myself against the whisperings and the temptations and the insincerity of the Shia. And he gave me lots of books on the, lots of books talking about the Shia being, God forbid, Kafirs and all the rest. And to be honest, even without necessarily going through the research of the arguments for one school versus another, just the akhlaq of the Shia brothers and sisters versus the Sunni alim and the way that they were both dealing with me was almost enough for me to make my decision. Of course, I did decide to research further. And so, in a nutshell, to answer your question, sister, I came to the fold of Ahlul Bayt when I became a Muslim. So I was aware of the differences and made my choice.
That's a very interesting perspective. Thank you so much for sharing that. Again, I just want to remind the viewers that we are here to assist all Muslims, regardless of their sect, background, and we're only opening up these topics not to create more division, but to actually create more sort of collaboration, because I've had people on the show that are from all sects, all backgrounds, and all different challenges, and we are not here to ever sort of put anyone down or put anyone up. We're just here to create literally integration, more understanding, because the more we understand each other, the more we can respect each other, even if we come from our own perspective. It's really important that we understand this. We're not here to actually, make anyone feel worse or good, because even if one person has the same sort of knowledge, their own journey will take them to the destination that is due for them. And we ourselves respect that. That's why we're opening up the platform for everybody. And I love the fact that we are doing this, and, for everyone to actually learn about each other. And thank you, Brother Rauf. That was an amazing explanation. And it's really interesting to hear your take. Sayed, do you feel that, as much as you said that we shouldn't really divide ourselves and call ourselves in a particular way, but unfortunately, that's how people identify themselves. That's part of their identity. That's part of not just their upbringing, but and maybe more and more now, because I remember people saying years ago, even in places like Iraq, there was no such thing as people knowing the differences between Shia and Sunni. And then as, the political state changed, now it's becoming more of an issue. I mean, people married and integrated, and it wasn't a problem. Now it's like the first question is, after Islam, after saying you're Muslim, it's like, are you Shia Sunni? Even though there's other sects involved and also around. What's your thoughts on that, Sayed?
You're right. When you say that you've heard from Iraqis, I could say that for the subcontinent of India and Pakistan, which has the largest Muslim population in the world, largest Muslim countries, Indonesia, and India has more Muslims than Indonesia. Although all figures are played, the statistics, every country plays with the numbers that they have of Muslim, of course, of the Shias. But India has something like 300 million Muslims, or just below 300 million Muslims. Pakistan, another 235 million Muslims. Bangladesh, 165 million Muslims. So if you just calculate, about 40%, 35 to 40% of the world's population lies in this subcontinent. And over the years, we have seen an increase in sectarianism. Likewise, in other countries, people have now started associating. And I remember even in our own family, not directly but older generation, there were people who were married outside Shia faith, and so it was very common. But we can see that over the years, all religions, even I was reading through some of the other religions, even Christianity, Judaism, Hindus have very openly and clearly started talking about being faithful to their religion and not accepting the other faith, or even entire movement of Khalistan in India from the Sikhs, that they want a separate country. And so likewise, the most affected by this, the geopolitical situations and media. Unfortunately, in the past 20 years, we've seen the growth in social media. Many many of us were deprived of having a voice. And now that we have a voice, unfortunately, we haven't been able to get across to the other, whatever that other may be, other sects and other religions, but we have only got voice for ourselves. So the Shias were oppressed, some were being killed, targeted. So we now have a voice through social media, but we only keep it within ourselves. We are not able to, we have not still learned how to use social media to actually deliver our voice to others. And we can see that, unfortunately, sectarianism is increasing. And the political agendas of international colonial powers, without being too political, without pointing any countries out, but the global colonial powers, their establishment has played a major role in financing Boko Haram, for example, or ISIS, and all sectarian groups that target Shias or any other group are sponsored.
Mm.
And you can see in many parts of Africa and Asia that colonial powers have used this tool, and we can see some big powers who have openly said that the best tool is not to go to war, but rather make the Shias and Sunnis fight each other.
Mm.
There are better figures if you read some of the Western blogs that there are 90 million Sunnis in the Middle East and 120 million Shias. And if we make them fight each other, then we will achieve better results rather than attacking these countries ourselves. And hence ISIS was created and other racist groups were created. So there is an increase. You are right, 100%. I agree with that. I've traveled across the globe in the past 20 years, over 30, 40, probably 50 countries. And in that, I have noticed that internationally, there is an increase in religion intolerance, sectarianism, and prejudices, and also political movements, Islamophobia, and many rises on many different fronts, which will continue to rise because of the exposure, because of the political agendas, and because of intolerances that we have built, unfortunately, for different reasons. If you target a group, then they build a grudge. For example, in Afghanistan, the wars, uh, the Hazaras, for example, they felt that they were only 20 to 25% Shias in Afghanistan, but because they were targeted for such a long time, then they have resentments. Likewise, in other parts of the world, for example, the black community in America. So likewise, the Shias, because unfortunately they were not an equal number in most countries. They were a minority, 20, 30% population. In many countries, even less. There are only 4 or 5 countries with a Shia majority, like Iran, Iraq, and a few others, very few others. But generally, because of a larger population of others, the Shias have been continuously deprived. So now they have started building their own populations, and they've become distant from others because they feel they may be targeted, we may be killed. So it is not only happening from the others. Yes, Alhamdulillah, we may not be violent or terrorists, but I think the Shias are now pulling themselves behind as well, rather than mixing so much, because they feel that they are killed and targeted. So they stay close to each other, they bond with each other and do not mix with others, unfortunately. I don't want to lecture you on this, but
No, it's I can listen all night, to be honest. It's absolutely interesting, and you blew me away with all those statistics as well. It's so impressive, mashallah. It's really an honor to have someone like yourself sitting today and speaking with us, just like Brother Rauf as well, with his experience. This is what we need, and we need to have these open, uncomfortable discussions that we need to not brush under the carpet, so that we can actually only give more learning and education in order for us to develop ourselves and grow. Brother Rauf, now looking at it, like forget the political side of things. Of course, it's always top down, but what about the bottom up? When it comes to our actual communities, what you see around you, you've been Muslim for many years, and you also with your job, you've sat with many people, even in media, speaking to them and having that insight that most people don't have. And I know your knowledge is vast generally on your own, which is amazing. What's your thoughts on how our communities actually try to integrate, whether or not it's in marriage with different sects or friendships? Because our Sayyid just mentioned, we are holding ourselves back. Do you see that actually still continuing, or do you see there's some sort of like, movement to maybe even, because, even as much as, the powers may be strong and it comes from the top, but I think if people at the bottom are actually making steps and moving forward to do these things. If they're not, then, that could be something considered. What's your experience around you?
I think that, as Sayed has mentioned, I think as is the case in all of these situations, we always kind of need to understand our past so that
Mm-hmm.
inshallah we can move forward in a progressive manner. When I first became a Muslim, and of course, because as a revert, and you don't have many uh, black or Nigerian Shias in London, so you find yourself going to different centers: Iraqi, Iranian, Pakistani, Indian. And you, of course, you find that inshallah they're all welcoming. Of course, there may be some elements of racism, if it's fair to call it that. It's probably not even racism. But when you come into these, I remember, again, don't forget, we're talking about 20, 25 years ago. I remember going into a lot of these mosques, and people would look at me as an outsider. And I subsequently became aware of the fact that it probably wasn't racism. It was probably suspicion. It was probably curiosity. As Sayed mentioned, many of our Shiite communities here in the UK have, for the most part, come from parts of the world where they've been oppressed. And as Sayed has mentioned, we have become a little bit too comfortable in our own communities. So I think that at least back then, you would find that the Pakistani Shias would be very comfortable staying in a Pakistani Aragha. The Iraqis would like to go to their own Husseiniya, etc., etc. But in that time, we found that the Shias amongst themselves, although as Sayed has mentioned, we're maybe not as open as we should be, but we're a lot more comfortable mingling amongst ourselves. So you can go to a majlis where Sayyid, mashallah, is reciting, and you won't just find Pakistani brothers and sisters there. You'll find a cosmopolitan community. And I think that is a good lesson for us going forward, that we need to take it to the next level. So, for example, how do we bring our culture to the wider Muslim community, or even not necessarily bring our culture? We're always encouraged by our Maraja to pray with our Sunni brothers. Alhamdulillah, I must admit, despite the fact that I live in London and I don't go to my local Sunni mosque, whenever I travel around the country or I travel around the world, I will look for a mosque to go and pray in, and I'm more than happy to go and pray in a Sunni masjid, if you like. So I think it's one of the ways that we maybe can teach the next generation. Whereas maybe our forefathers were quite comfortable staying amongst themselves for their safety. There was a time where their life could depend on it. Maybe we need to encourage or infuse our youngsters with that confidence in themselves. And I think living here in the UK is an advantage as well, because we live in a cosmopolitan society anyway. And if we try to be very kind of parochial, very kind of narrow-minded, we're not really going to fit in this world. We have to mingle with people who are not Muslims. We have to mingle with people who are not from the same ethnic background as us. English is our common language. Whether you're a Christian, an atheist, a Sunni, or a Shia or a Sufi, all of these, we have so many things in common. And I think, and I hope, and I pray that the next generation will, inshallah, lead the way and take us, if you like, those further steps for us to integrate even more.
Thank you. You just, highlighted so much there, and I've just got a list of questions. I hope I can get through them. But no, that's amazing insight, Brother Rove. Absolutely. I actually said exactly what you did in a talk myself with regards to us opening up our minds, not just in travel, but just in the way in which we speak to each other and being sort of like inviting, regardless of the background. Sayed, I know that you mentioned about sectarianism, you know, with regards to background as well as sect, with like Shia, Sunni, Sufi, whatever it may be. Do you think that our ulama, especially now in in our sort of madhab, is actually doing enough to be inviting and to open up doors for other sect to come and listen, to come and learn, to come and have conversations, to come and even join the teams to even, you know, have new projects? Or do you think there's so much more work to be done? On the other hand, I also have another question is, what are the rules of prayer? Because I don't know if it's true, but isn't it important as to who you pray behind and who's your imam? So how does that apply when you are praying in different mosques as well? And you can take your time. We have plenty of time.
Thank you. I don't want to be too critical because as the leader of Majlis Ulama, I can be held accountable for criticizing too much. I do feel, unfortunately, that we have gone backwards in terms of opening up to people. Very quickly, I want to mention one or two things. One is, you know, al-insano nasu a'da'u ma jahil. People are enemies of what they don't know.
Mm.
Don't have the exposure to the other. That's why we think that, oh, they are bad, they are evil. I went on a journey to Iraq. You know, the Iranians have a conference, you know, Hafta Wahdat, or the Unity Week. They invite for conferences. So I went to a few. And the Sunni scholars that were invited from UK, they said that we want to visit Iraq because more holy personalities, Shia and Sunni, are in Iraq. And so they requested from Iranians, and Iranians said we cannot provide the security there, and we cannot. And then there was a long discussion: is it useful? Is it not? You know, and I voted it is useful. Many scholars have noted it's not useful. And when I said it's going to be useful, they said, okay, then you lead the group. They said, you know, we want a guy from the Shias who can take us to all the places. And so I led this group, and after an 8-day visit to Iraq, all the Sunni scholars said to me that our entire perception about Shias and Shia scholars has changed. Every single one of them. And they said it is because we never thought that the Shias are like this. And then sometimes, you know, like I like talking, so I had the microphone all the time in the bus, and I was explaining to them, oh, this is where we are, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going next. And because being, you know, scholars, you keep criticizing and keep questioning. So they kept continuously asking, going, oh, hang on, what about this? They were attacking me all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And after the next day, they all had a meeting, and they said, you know, this guy, we can't believe the patience he has. You know, we've said everything to him on his face. And I realized that, you know, they're all my guests because they're in Najaf and Karbala. So I was having more patience than I normally have. You know, I would probably normally answer back, but then I held myself back and did not disrespect them in any way.
Mm-hmm.
And it taught me about them, and they learned so much. They all said that, you know, our entire perception has changed. So I think going to the places changes our perception because we don't even know the other. Now, in the 90s, you know, we had information centers, and sometimes, you know, we did some tabligh work. Over the years, we have increased, but the mixing has gone less. Sometimes, you know, the Sunnis had majalis and they invited us, and I see rarely now. Probably I have become very busy myself, but I think we have not done enough, and we are not doing enough. I'm talking about the Shia side. The others I cannot criticize because I want to say anything about them, they may be offended. But I think, you know, if you believe that you are on the right path and you believe in the best religion, then you need to, number one, produce the best character because you believe that your faith is the best. Then it is your duty to produce the best character. And number two, it is your duty to reach out to people. Why are you trying to keep everything to yourselves? You need to reach out to people and open up. I have seen in recent years that people have started talking about this, and you are now doing it. And there are some major organizations, you know, the bigger Shia centers, who have now started programming again from, you know, like 20 years back, 15 years ago, there was some activities and then everything stopped, and then things have now started again. So people have done these things but because they've not seen the results they probably had in mind.
Mhm.
Always remember, patience is the key. Holy Prophet ﷺ converted a few hundred people in Makkah in 13 years, but he converted 100,000 people in 9-10 years in Medina. You see, the biggest thing about the Holy Prophet ﷺ is the patience. Imam Ali alayhi salam, patience. He says, I have so much patience, I've had so much patience in my life, that even patience now asks me, Ya Ali, how much more patience will you have? And
Wow.
unfortunately, people who believe and who come out to reach out to people and work with people, they have less patience. I'm taking too much time, but I want to say one last thing
No,
before,
you're
and then
not. You're not taking time. Please continue. Please continue. We have time.
very quickly, I want to make 2 points. One about, some of the great Maharaj home, because I wanted to study Najaf, but Saddam Lanatullah alayhi was controlling Najaf and did not allow us to go to Najaf. So I went to Qom, and Qom was beautiful. Some of the greatest Maharaj there used to always say, "O Muballighin, O preachers, give me the thawab of your tabligh and take the thawab of my ijtihad." And as young student, I used to think, why do they say such things? It takes 5 years to become a muballigh. I've become muballigh in 5 years. And it takes him about 50 years, half a century to become a marja taqleed. Why is he saying, take the thawab of 50 years and give me the thawab of 5 years? When I came to practical life, I realized that tabligh, mujtahid's work is only with ulama, scholars, and learned people, not with people, awam, lay people. And a muballigh needs to have, like they used to say a sentence, you need the chest of a prophet, a messenger, because Allah chose messengers to do tabligh. So you need to have a very wide, like alam nashrah laka sadr, very wide chest, patience, sabr. Do not criticize people. Don't fight with them. Patience. And I think we lack patience. Within after 5-10 years of tabligh, we say, oh, I haven't had the results. I only converted 20 people. So it's not. So what? One person who finds truth is better than whatever the earth has. This is the hadith of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I think patience is the key. And once you start the tabligh, do not lose patience. 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and then it starts paying off. The last point that you asked a question about, we have conditions for even imams. That, for example, they have to be a man, sane, adult, legitimate of birth. They have to be just, fair in his dealings, Shias Nashiri, and and the reputation has to be correct. So now 7 conditions, and one of them is that she has to be Shias Nashiri. But all of our scholars say that if it makes the 2 groups come closer to each other, then praying together, there is no problem, and your prayer is accepted. You don't have to repeat those prayers. So all of our Maharajas say that it does cause closeness. I remember with my amama and my religious dress, I went to a Sunni masjid and we were praying, and everyone started staring, and they said, "What are our scholars doing?" They didn't think I was Pakistani, and they thought I was Iranian because of my dress. So they were speaking in Urdu, and I could understand everything. So they were criticizing and saying, "What our scholars are doing? They've invited Shias now to our center. How low can inviting these kafirs?" And I just kept smiling. They don't know I'm listening to everything and I'm understanding it. And after Asr, so we all in our amama, all the scholars came and we all prayed behind the Sunni scholar. And the Sunni scholar, he was a Wahhabi scholar. He got up and he said, "I request that one of you speaks for 5 minutes." So they all said, "Okay, you." So I spoke, and I said, "Should I speak in Urdu or English?" And they all, started looking at each other, thinking, "Oh, they're really embarrassed." And they all came after that session and they apologized, and they all, said that your 5 minutes took away all of the hatred we had. Just the 5 minutes that you spoke. So I think it is extremely important, Annasu a'da'u ma jahilu. People are enemies of what they don't know. I remember going to a funeral. A Shia lady had died. Her husband was Sunni, and the funeral was in this. And they said, "We will not have a Shia Imam lead. Our nikahs will break, and we will have to recite the nikah again, and it is not on." And I said, "It's fine. I can pray behind you." But the sons of the ladies, they said, "No, our mother made a will to us that I want a Shia scholar to lead my janazah. I've remained in the Sunni masjid for all of my life, but I was born a Shia and I want a Shia funeral." So they said, okay, you can pray outside, and if anyone wants to pray, then they didn't allow us to pray inside the masjid. So we prayed in the grounds, and they said, can you explain why did you do 5 takbirat and everything? I gave only a 5-minute talk. 70 to 80% of our Sunni brothers came up to me and said, we didn't know.
Mhm.
Everything you have said about the 5 takbirat, none of our scholars have. So I think we are to blame partly as well, because we have never gone into their gatherings, explained to them, and we have not given them the respect to, so I think they deserve the explanation, and they want to know. It is not that they don't want to know. We have never gone out to explain to them, to mix with them, to the scholars who went with me and the scholars that have mixed, they have shown me so much respect. They introduced me to their families and said, this is a man that we all wanted to introduce. So I think we are to blame. If we don't mix, then how will people know who we are?
Beautifully explained again. I totally understand why you're always, your name is put forward to actually be the speaker and the lead sort of, to go forward and introduce whatever you have to, because mashallah, it's just so eloquent and it's just so simple, but at the same time, you're being honest about everything that has been laid out today. And it's really, really vital that we do hear our Sayyid, our leaders, our scholars that are speaking in this way, which we don't have the platforms for. And it's really amazing that you even say about the patience that we need to have, even if someone is attacking us. We should not sort of have that sort of hatred back. We should just have more understanding. And I think it's more about, like you said, it's the education that we need to give ourselves and each other. Brother Raouf, do you find that if it wasn't for yourself taking on that journey of your own sort of wanting to learn, wanting to research, that, a lot of people might just fall into, a different way of, continuing their faith? How important is education, whether even if you're coming as a new Muslim? I honestly always say, even, born Muslims, they can't inherit. They really can't inherit their sort of faith. They have to still question and reaffirm what is being told to them. So it's not just for new Muslims. Do you think that our children are getting that sort of, because, as much as we're talking about, the past and the leaders, we need to also start thinking about the future generation, because this is what's going to make those great leaders and going to lead the way. But we have to give them that support from now. And do you feel that even in our madrasas, in the Shia madhab, for example, are we giving that kind of education to encourage them to continue to integrate, to even learn about themselves other than just Quran or the basics? Because I feel that unless you go to the proper Islamic studies and you choose that for yourself, it is very limiting and it's not opening up the space, which is another topic for another day, of course. But what is your experience really when it comes to our children? Because these are the times that we need to consider our future now.
Thank you very much indeed, Sister, for that particular question. It's a question I grappled with for many a year, because I had been Muslim for a number of years before I got married, and then alhamdulillah had children of my own. So even before these children were born, I was asking the same questions. What would be an appropriate education for the children? Many times we hear in lectures from our respected ulama how we as parents spend a lot of money when it comes to things like tuition. We want the best education for our children. But when it comes sometimes to religious learning, if you like, the more beneficial learning in terms of the hereafter, some of us are slightly more reluctant, especially if we have to spend money. That being said, I think there are a number of madrasas in the UK and in the West who, in my humble experience, because of my children, are doing a grand job. Of course, we should always look for improvement. But my children don't just learn how to recite Quran. They learn about the history of the prophets. They learn stories of the prophets from the Holy Quran. They learn about the life of the Ahlul Bayt. They learn about the expectations upon them when it comes to akhlaq, their morality. They are also taught about understanding the society in which they live. While they don't have to subscribe to everything that goes on in society, they should consider themselves part and parcel of the society. As Sayyid has mentioned, they should not just be in this society in one corner. They should see themselves as, inshallah, one day contributing positively with their Islamic background to this particular society. So what I'm saying in essence is it's full circle. I remember speaking to one of our respected ulama, and he was saying that sadly, even though, many of our children, alhamdulillah, go to madrasa, for every child that goes to madrasa, there are many more who don't, whose parents, for whatever reason, don't send their children to madrasa. So even if we had world-class syllabuses for our children and good teachers who are well-trained, all of these things we obviously need to improve on. It only goes so far if not all of our brothers and sisters, Sunni, Shia, whatever, are sending their children to madrasa. So there's a responsibility on us as parents. There's also responsibility on these institutions to, inshallah, continue to increase the scope of learning, so that it's not just about Quran, making it interesting for them as well. Alhamdulillah, and I've noticed with my own children that ever since lockdown was introduced, they complain about the fact that they don't get the opportunity to go to madrasa. They don't get the opportunity to interact with their other friends in madrasa, apart from on Zoom. And of course, for a child of 12, 10, and 4, Zoom has its limitations. So we have work to do in all of these areas, no doubt.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you for highlighting those points. And it's really good. I mean, I don't want to highlight just the negative. It is obviously out there that there are many good schools giving a very holistic learning to our faith. But again, as you said, it's not just on a Saturday or Sunday or after school. We need to also advise parents, as much as secular education is important, the Islamic education is not just for this life, but the hereafter. And that needs to be first and foremost. And to invest in that, not just in when you're taking them to these madrasas, but actually try and, perform some of those rituals that they are learning in the actual schools, the Arabic schools, in the home. I know that for a fact that it shouldn't be a separate thing. It should be a continuation, and our parents need to be strong on that, so that whatever is being taught in the actual madrasas, the Arabic schools, whatever it may be, it's going to continue in our household. And I think that's going to be something more powerful for our children today. We do have about 4 minutes left, and I just want to go to our Sayyid with some final words about how we may even, try to keep to our faith, but also continue with integration and have understanding. And what are some of the maybe steps that we can take forward from this discussion, this sort of talk today, so that we can actually have someone maybe change a mindset, give a tip that they can actually do something that they weren't doing before. Because I want people to really not just listen, but actually do something for themselves. And if each one of us takes that responsibility, that's what creates change, transformation, and then it creates that society that we actually require, not just by having the knowledge, but by using that knowledge in our practical life.
A number of things I can very quickly count. Number one, in the Shia faith, we usually talk about usul-din and furu-din, and the principles of faith and the practices. So the example given in our traditional books is the roots of a tree are the faith or the principles, and branches are the practices. We always forget the fruit. The most important part of the tree is the fruit, and that is akhlaq, or the ethics. And all of the fruits on one tree should be described to children. In just one hadith of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he counts 75, 76 attributes that a woman should possess. We always just mention two things: truthfulness and trustworthiness. I think we need to count all of those and explain that akhlaq is one of the most important. So as Majlis Ulama, we have over 70 centers, but only 40 of those, 45 of those have madaris, and just 5,000 all over the country, while I believe we should have about 50,000. If all the children came, we should have over 50,000. Well, a lot of the children, because after 14, 15, they say, we have GCSEs, A-levels now, we don't want. That's the time when they need the education the most, but that's when we stop. So I think akhlaq, should be, we've integrated it into our syllabus, but I think it should be a part of our lives. Some of the things, we study, but we don't adapt. Ethical things are to adapt, it should be a part and parcel of our life. I should be able to, when people, for example, say, oh, I gave my last job, my builder's job or whatever, to a Shia and he was a good, it will, reflect good on the entire community. Number two, I think, joint classes. I remember attending where, human rights. They had, whites, blacks, Asian, different races, background together, 24 people in one room. And they knew that all of these people had some issues with the other race. So they said, okay, as human beings, what do you think are the common, human rights? So they studied them together and they said, well, we all have right to live. We all have right to food. We all have. So they said, okay, if you have it, do you think the other also has it? They said, yeah, as a human being, he should be given food. Studying it together, they realized that, we all have common things. Even if he is black or white or Asian or any other race, he's still a human being like me, and he still has same rights as me. So as Muslims, if we did a session to rid sectarianism, that okay, you think the others are Muslims or not? So what makes the Muslim? If we have a session together, all the different sects came together, the Sunnis, Wahhabis, Deobandis, and Barelvis, and Shias, and the Sufis. They said, okay, what makes a person a Muslim? Okay, believe in one God. Okay, so they all have it. Believe in the Holy Prophet. Okay, they all have it. The Quran, they all have it. Qibla, they all have it. The hereafter. So how do you define the other person to be kafir? When you have so many commonalities, then how do you declare the other ones as disbelievers? So I think sectarianism will get.
Oh, I'm sorry, we must have lost connection there. We just came towards the end of the show anyway, but thank you, Sayyid Ali Raza Rizvi, for your enlightening discussion and talk and so much information that we all can actually take away from. And thank you as well, Brother Rauf Shokora. It's just amazing. Sorry, we lost connection there, Sayyid, for a minute.
Sorry.
I was just ending. But no, I really do thank you both for being here tonight. We have sadly come to the end of the show, and it's been an absolute pleasure. I've learned so much myself from both of you. And, to have this kind of experience is amazing. And I'm blessed myself to have this platform to be, inviting guests like yourself and, to have you share your thoughts. This is giving back to the community. This is actually, sharing time, knowledge. And inshallah, we will have you back again very soon, I'm sure. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you both for joining me. And thank you so much, dear viewers, for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure. And hopefully we will hear more from yourself as well. And we hope to invite new guests with new topics. And inshallah, we